Aaron Bhatnagar, great to see you.
Hi Jake, how are you?
Yeah, thank you so much for having us at your home.
I'm delighted to have you here.
Yeah, very much appreciated. So, you're a great friend, an astute investor, and an all-around successful businessman. What drives you today?
What drives me today? Look, I love the thought of being involved with people who do amazing things, with people who want to grow companies, who provide solutions to problems, people who want to make the world a better place in their own special and small way. And I have an opportunity as an investor to come and back those visions, and it's very exciting. It's quite fulfilling.
Okay, and are there any sort of areas, you invest in a lot of companies across a range of fields, are there any areas that, problems in the world that you want to see smart entrepreneurs solve?
Well, some of them are commercial focuses. So obviously some of my more successful investments have been in fintech and financial technology and SaaS businesses, so subscription-based businesses. But some of the companies that we've invested in have been things like aged healthcare, which has been an issue of increasing importance here in New Zealand, how we care for our elderly and the way in which those services are provided for over the next 15, 25 years. So there's a number of sectors and markets. Agriculture is one, and also biotechnology as well has been of interest. So,
and with all of this focus, what does success look like for you in 5 or 10 years from now?
I think success for me is probably doing a lot more of the same. I'm sorry if that doesn't sound particularly exciting, but I am quite young, compared to a number of people that you might potentially interview. So I'm on a pathway, or rather the Bhatnagar family, I should say, is on a pathway at the moment, and we've really only been walking down that path for a fairly short while. So there's a lot more companies that we've backed and we intend to back that will reach maturity. Or have yet to reach maturity. So really, I think staying on our current course and continuing to back great companies and looking for great investments is where I'm going to be for the next 5 to 10 years.
For sure, yeah. And I guess from a personal perspective, you've got 3 sons, Christopher, Alexander and Sebastian, wonderful boys. Anyone who knows you knows your sons are fantastic boys, very well mannered, very smart. So what are the greatest values that you want to instill in them?
Loyalty. Understanding how to help people, and that's both from a sense of both compassion, but also how that translates into business, because the great businesses are ones where you can help a person solve their problem, and you can help a person solve a problem in their personal life as well, and help make someone's life better in a social sense. So understanding how that you can make people's lives better is I think is a key driver, I think, in the values that I teach my children.
Yeah, and what's your greatest hope for them?
I think that they lead rewarding, fulfilling lives that they choose, that they can aspire to do the things that they love the most. And who knows what that is, but I think that the one thing I want to make sure as a father is that I can equip them to do the very best for the things that they love and that they want to do, rather than me pushing them into a certain direction. Says, I think you need to be a doctor or something like that. If they want to be a doctor, wonderful. I'd love to have a son as a doctor.
Yes.
Who's a doctor, but they've got to make their decisions in life.
Right.
But I want to be able to help them reach that potential.
Yeah, and there's that old saying, I believe EY did a study that said that the first generation makes it, the second grows it, the third loses it. Not to say that you haven't made a lot
the
yourself.
Americans say, is it shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations? And so one of the things which we've been focusing a lot on in 2018 has been asset planning. So we've set up a family office. We've been involved in a large amount of asset planning now that the family situation kind of requires that we focus on these sorts of things. We're in a very healthy position at the moment, so it's a good time for us to think about what do we want the Bhatnagar and the wider Bhatnagar family to look like over the next few generations.
And just finally on this, I guess a lot of kids who often grow up around sort of enormous privilege sometimes lack kind of like the drive and the determination to achieve great success. Particularly that, I guess, like hard work ethic and like going out and earning it yourself. How are you instilling that in them?
I would say a lot of it's actually through sports.
Yeah.
My boys are all pretty ferocious and competitive sports players, particularly at football. They all play in top representative teams for their club and for their school. They take it personally when they lose games. They take it personally when there isn't the kind of teamwork or the disappointments that come from not playing well, and equally from enjoying the success that comes from playing well as a team and indeed as an individual. I think also, they are at a school that demands high performance.
Yes.
in academic, in the academic world and cultural world.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that you need to bring home great exam results, but it does mean that you need to demonstrate that you tried your absolute best.
Yeah, absolutely. Coming back to business, you've got extensive experience in politics, communications, property investment, yet you've chosen to kind of dedicate, I guess your life, and particularly the last few years and going forward, to venture capital. Why is that? Why is this a path you've chosen to take?
I think circumstances kind of dictated it, to be fair. My father fell on poor health starting back in 2007, 2008. That was when I was an Auckland City Councillor. But by 2009, 2010, it was quite clear that my father's challenges required the family to be more hands-on with its wealth management. And so I made a decision to not stand for re-election for what was then going to become the new super city,
Right.
And to focus more on business and family wealth management.
Yeah.
So firstly, that was more listed investments, stock exchange listed companies, but investing in seed and Series A unlisted companies became quite a focus from 2011, 2012 onwards.
Okay, and how's your father doing today?
Oh, look, I think he's happy in his skin. I mean, he does suffer cognitive and physical challenges from having a few strokes. Look, I think he actually takes enormous pleasure from seeing how successful the family's been over the last few years, remembering, of course, that he was a self-made man, and his journey is quite a remarkable one. So to see the next generation come along and do something great with what he's done, I think has been a great sort of source of satisfaction to him.
Yeah, and I can imagine, we've spoken about your boys, they must be learning a huge amount growing up watching your example. But when you look back over your childhood growing up watching your dad, what are some of the biggest lessons that stick out for you?
Oh, I remember one thing he said about when he was buying Noel Leeming from the receivers of Smith City Group. And he said that I am buying the systems and the people.
Right.
And in hindsight, that's actually an extremely good lesson, I think, where for anyone who is looking to allocate capital into a company, whether as an investor or potentially as a founder or an insider, is to think about, the quality of the systems in the company and the quality of the people. And, it's very much front of mind for me whenever I consider a company, because it's proven to be so true.
Yeah, and his kind of style of business of buying this company and growing it up and listing it, is that something you want to ultimately do yourself?
No, I'd rather back people to do that. I don't think that I'd ever see myself as a chief executive of a company, but I think that I can enable people to become great chief executives. I tend not to be a director of the companies that I invest in, although occasionally I have taken that role, and I wouldn't rule out taking a more aggressive role in becoming directors of companies. But I think in terms of enabling entrepreneurs to reach their potential, there is something I can offer as an investor.
Absolutely. And the past, 10 years have seen, in venture capital, the disruption of multiple industries. It's probably been one of the biggest areas of change in recent times. Where do you see the greatest opportunities today, or opportunities for change?
In terms of sectors?
For valuable companies to be founded. What areas are you most hot on right now?
I think artificial intelligence has to be up there, cybersecurity as well. So it was my privilege to go to Israel last year on the cybersecurity delegation. That was a real eye-opener for me to see exactly the problems that are being caused by cybersecurity challenges and the ways in which both governments and corporations are looking to resolve those challenges. And so I think that you're going to see a very strong partnership between both state and commerce to resolve those questions. both criminal, both in terms of criminal issues, but also state actors causing havoc.
Yes.
So those areas excite me.
Yeah.
I didn't pay much attention to bitcoins and ICOs and similar. It looked like a fad to me, so I stayed out of it. But AI and cybersecurity do interest me.
Okay, and what's your principal way of learning about these areas? Do you read a lot? Do you listen to podcasts? How do you
I'm really getting into my podcasts. Okay. It's something that I've only been doing for a short period of time, but particularly when I'm in the car, it's just absolutely fantastic to be driving around, and instead of listening to the radio, to be listening to something like Masters in Business by Barry Ritholtz.
Yep.
Meb Faber's fantastic as well. There's a number of podcasts which I'm subscribing to, which I'm really enjoying.
That's great. And we're going to talk more about how you analyse these investments in the pitch
Sure.
very soon. But I just want to talk briefly. In 2010, you announced your candidacy for the National Party in Botany. Do you still have a desire to become a Member of Parliament today?
No. I mean, I joke, but I was unwell at the time and I'm better now. But, look, I loved my time in politics. It was a very enjoyable and rewarding experience, but I love what I'm doing now, and it's easier for me to help people who want to be politicians and help people who want to get involved in politics, rather than be at the coalface. I mean, I've been on plenty of committees and run campaigns, successful campaigns, and done some very innovative things in terms of campaign technology, which today I think parties like national or in local government, they're not doing enough of. I loved campaign science, and I spent a lot of time researching what the best to do in terms of communication. So I became pretty upskilled in political communications. But no, I'm very happy to be focused on business and family life now.
I think it was probably a few weeks ago now. I think you're probably the most famous man in the country. Your face was all over the news after the Jamie Lee Ross scandal.
Sure.
What happened?
I gave a donation to the National Party, which was miscoded up by someone at the National Party, and when they realised that they'd made a mistake, they then resubmitted the form correctly. But of course, Jamie Lee Ross, it appears, used that to say that the National Party was doing something wrong. And so when my donation was coded up, it was coded up under the name of a dinner party group, which existed some time ago. A group of friends who came together and shared food and conversation with interesting people. We had guests like Winston Peters, Jonathan Hunt. It was by no means a National Party thing.
Right.
But anyway, when I realised that this dinner club was going to somehow become famous, I said, look, I'm very happy to talk about it. So I put a statement on my Facebook page and gave the Herald a statement, and approximately a few hours after it all happened, everyone forgot about it because it was, okay, well, he gave some money to the party, big deal.
And what do you make of this? Because Simon Bridge as well, presumably you know Jamie Lee Ross well. I mean, it's scary that someone can go so rogue. When you look at this situation, I mean, what do you make of it?
I think someone loved the political game just a little bit too much, the intrigue, and forgot about what you're supposed to do when you're involved in politics, which is to make people's lives better, or to stop things making people's lives worse. And if you go into politics and you think, okay, I want to stop things that are hurting the people that I care about or my constituency, and I want to do things that help improve their lives, then you've got the right focus. But when you start getting involved in a bit too much intrigue, and politics is full of intrigue, it happens all the time, but I think Jamie Lee Ross might have loved that intrigue a little bit too much.
Should he leave?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Do you think there's a future for him anywhere in New Zealand, or do you think he needs to leave the country in order to have a meaningful career and pathway moving forward?
I absolutely want to see him have a meaningful life out of politics, and so maybe a fresh start would help him. But I mean, that's for he has children, and he is married, although. I'm not sure what will happen there. It's a difficult situation that he's in, but he still has an opportunity to be a great father, and he still has an opportunity to have a great life. So he's got to get out of politics and focus on what's really important.
Is Simon Bridges the man to lead National with a victory?
I think so. Yes. I think that he has got an amazing opportunity ahead of him. He's certainly had a baptism of fire like nothing else, but I think he's coming through stronger. And I'd make this observation that people in New Zealand don't vote for their prime ministers. People vote for the parties that they identify with the most. And it's an important thing to bear in mind because we don't have a presidential system. And you look at previous prime ministers like Helen Clark, Jim Bolger, and you can go back in history and find politicians whose personal popularity did not directly mesh with their party's popularity, but it didn't matter because that's not how it works in New Zealand.
Yeah. And you're a man who's been quite open about your politics in the past. If you look at the US, and having lived in New York, I think in New Zealand, the vast majority of people just look at what's going on, and in particular the president himself, and just go, "This man is a total nut job." But you go to New York, and even it's particularly Middle America, but even these big cities that are traditionally quite blue in America, and there's a lot of really smart people who are supporting Donald Trump and voting for Republicans today. We're talking like big finance people, people in professionals all over the country. If you were in America, do you think you'd be supporting Donald Trump?
Probably not. Probably not. I think he's a bit too erratic for my liking. But I'll make this one observation because as an investor, you should never allow your politics to dictate the way that you invest. And so if, for example, you thought, George W. Bush was a warmongering chimpanzee, I'm not going to invest in America, then you missed out on that bull run between 2001 and 2007. And then the GFC hit. But if you then went around and, if you're on the other side of politics and you said, I'm not going to invest in America because Barack Obama's a socialist Kenyan Muslim, which is what they were saying, then they missed out on that huge bull run from 2009 to the very end of Barack Obama's presidency. And so if you really care about being a great investor, then you actually need to divorce your politics from your way of investing. I very much ascribe to a free market, personal freedom philosophy. But under a Labour government, they will engage in policies that will benefit certain parts of the economy in certain ways. And I would not want to bet against New Zealand, regardless of who was in government. New Zealand is such a great place to live that you can just rely on the ingenuity of New Zealand people to make New Zealand a compelling place to live. And occasionally we get the tailwind of a great government that makes it even more obvious. But even when it's a tough time for New Zealand, it's still a great place to live.
Talking about not letting politics dictate investments, would you say that applies to Saudi Arabia right now?
In terms of
some of these big companies pulling out of deals with the Saudis and so on, do you think that they're the right decisions being made?
Probably yes. I think that
that's an extreme example though, right?
It is an extreme example, but that's probably why extreme positions are being taken.
For sure. I know your comment was more in general, right?
Dealing with Middle Eastern countries have been problematic for a number of reasons. But it's very hard, I think, for American businesses to be honest and genuine about their desire to invest in certain countries when there are clearly large issues that are to be confronted, and let's face it, investors like stability. And so if there's a perception that a country in a difficult location is suffering significant instability because of political decisions, then that harms investment.
Absolutely. Just finally on your story, I know you're also a passionate art collector. You own several Colin McCanns, including this one here. One you bought off Kate Blanchett. I know how addictive collecting art can be. What compels you to buy art? I love art that makes me think, that makes me, that challenges me. McCann's works were very autobiographical, so he often wrote about his questions of faith. So in this particular work, you'll see the noughts and crosses, where the crosses are a Christian cross, and the noughts represent staring into the abyss.
And so if you like, this is McCann sort of rationalising his faith and his doubts of faith. And so I enjoy understanding and being challenged by what the artist is trying to make you think. So
how does this make you feel?
it inspires me. It makes me feel contemplative.
Yeah.
It makes me understand a person's pain and doubt. But it also inspires me because I know it's a great work of art from a great series by a great artist. So I enjoy that. I mean, it's just a thing of beauty to behold as well.
Yeah, and just on that, there's a lot of obviously money to be made in art if art investment is done well. But do you see this as an investment, or is it more of something you do for your own pleasure?
It's a mixture of both. For me, it's definitely about pleasure or enjoying. I think that for a future generation, it will represent a great investment. But with any collectible, you've actually got to hold it for a long period of time before you get that benefit of enjoyment. So there's a great family story I can share. My father, in 1994, purchased a McLaren F1 road car, the first one in New Zealand, and I think he paid $1.8 million for it, and he sold it for about the same price 6 years later. Today, McLaren F1s are selling for $23 million.
Wow.
So there's a lesson in there about holding a collectible. You've got to hold it for a generation to get that kind of benefit. So.
Do you remember that story? I must have been about 9, and I remember one of my family friends telling me that the guy who owned an old Leeming had this McLaren car. This is long before I knew you. So that must have been your father.
It drove like angels were pushing it.
Right.
I had the privilege of driving it about 6 or 7 times, including around a racetrack. It was pretty special.
That's awesome. I know another passion of yours is watches.
Yes.
You're a big watch collector. What's your favourite watch brand?
There's 2 that I love, Patek Philippe and Breguet. So they're both 2 grand old Swiss ladies, very classical in their tastes, but they've got wonderful histories and are incredibly well made. So they're things of beauty to behold.
That's awesome. Great. So we're just going to move into the next section now and talk about, how you make investment decisions and evaluate startups. So I want to talk firstly just about the Bhatnagar family investments, touching on Alliance Equities. Tell me about some of the companies that you've invested in recently.
Well, the obvious large one is PushPay. So we were pre-IPO investors in that and have held stock for the 4 years since we made our investment. We've actually divested a good chunk of that earlier in 2018. We've done extremely well from it. Other companies like Goody Card, other companies like Dairy Farms New Zealand, and there's a terrific little media company which I happened across as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And PushPay, would you invest in that today at its current price?
At its current price, I think it's about $3.67. Look, I'd be interested in buying it at current levels, but I'd love it a lot more at $3. So as an investor, you don't hate the asset, you always hate the price.
Yes.
Gold bars could be a compelling investment at the right price. PushPay shares become a compelling investment at the right price. PushPay is an amazing company with great people in it, with fantastic products and great vision, and of course they're a success story. But sometimes the share price gets ahead of it, and at certain levels, you'd be a seller, and certain levels you'd be a buyer.
Yeah, for sure. And how would you describe your core investment thesis?
Well, it sounds a bit trite, but buy low, sell high. I do love value investing methodology, so I like the idea of being a bit contrarian sometimes. If someone hates an investment, that's actually a reason for me to be interested. When people try and sell me investments, I'm often quite defensive about them because I'd rather go hunting for great investments rather than being sold an investment in a strong pitch sometimes, because it's the ones when you've got to start lifting up under rocks that you actually find some of the great ideas out there, and people who can really use help from investors, but didn't necessarily know where to start. Look, I love companies where there's a great sense of how they're trying to solve someone's pain point. That there's a problem that needs to be solved, and that the total addressable market for that product or for that problem being solved is large. It could be quite narrow, but very deep. So PushPay, again, is a great example
Exactly, yeah.
of, payments in the church sector is, people would say, oh gosh, that's quite that's quite a very niche sort of thing, but it's actually very deep as well. There's a lot of churches in the United States who are screaming out for a better digital experience.
Yep. Yeah, and you focused, I guess, primarily on SaaS businesses. Why is that?
I love the business model. For listed companies, my investments look like run-of-the-mill investments. So
Right.
they're carpet manufacturers and clothing retailers and telcos and similar. But for unlisted companies, I do like the SaaS model. I'm not frightened of pre-funding all those losses for a company that knows it's going to be growing its revenue strongly and can hold on to its customers, because once they've recovered the cost of that sale, they will do very well.
Yep.
It's all about that hockey stick of where you've got to worry about this part in here and to get to up there. And so SaaS businesses are great where the product is sticky, where they solve someone's problem, people want to keep using the product. It's a very good business model that pumps out good cash flow in time.
Right. And if you remove PushPay from the equation, in your case, I guess a lot of smart people we've interviewed, I remember speaking to Craig Heatley about this recently, I think, maybe he wrote it in his book, that his sort of performance on the share market in general, he's described as very average, I believe. If you remove PushPay, how would you describe your performance in listed companies?
Pretty good, but I've had my share of disasters too.
Yep.
And anyone who says that they only have winners
Right.
are liars.
Yeah.
Look, but the definition of a bad investment is not just one that goes to zero. I mean, that's the worst. The definition of a bad investment is the one where you sell far too early. And I'll share with you one great story of that. In 1996, 1997, I bought Apple at the equivalent of about $12 a share, $13 a share at the time. And a few years later, I sold it for $45. And I thought I was a genius. Tripled my money in a couple of years. With share splits and the way that Apple has gone, if I'd held on to those shares today, I would have made, instead of tripling my money, I would have made 125 times my money.
Wow.
So, bad investing is not just about choosing companies which are bad performers. Bad investing is also about selling perfectly good companies for no good reason at all.
Yes.
Just because they've gone up in price, you think, oh, I'll take some money off the table.
Right.
It's not necessarily a smart thing to do.
Yeah, well, speaking of which, if you look at those tech giants today, Apple, Google, Alphabet, Facebook.
FANG.
FAN, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Microsoft. What's the other? I think
Netflix.
that's Netflix. Exactly. What one of those like celebrity tech giants? If you had to bet on one company,
Apple.
what one would it be? And why?
Apple, easy.
Right.
Yeah, it would be Apple. Their cash flow is just absolutely insane.
Yeah.
They deliver products that people love. They have a moat around their business. I mean, no one's building Apple compatible products. So if you're in the Apple ecosystem,
That's true.
then you keep buying the Apple ecosystem. It's hard to get out of the Apple ecosystem.
Yeah.
And because they do such a good job of it, people don't want to leave.
Yeah.
They build objects of beauty. And often there's a human element to their products which make them just a delight to hold or to interact with.
Yeah.
And of course they've got terrific people involved in the company. I had the pleasure of meeting with their investor relations people a couple of years ago at the old One Infinite Loop campus.
Right.
Gosh, that was an experience and a half. That was fantastic.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, and Netflix are all amazing companies, but if I could own more Apple shares, I'd love to.
Right. You left Facebook off that list. Do you think they'll be here in 10
Facebook
years?
too? I have no idea, but I probably wouldn't bet the farm on Facebook for that reason.
Or Snap?
No, for the same reason.
Yeah.
Look, if you ask, as I said, if the question was which one of those ones would I want to bet on, or in fact, if you take the Warren Buffett approach, which is which one would you want to own, and then know that if the share market was turned off for 5 years, you could come back to and it would still be trading. Well, Apple would clearly be such a company.
Yeah.
could Netflix or Facebook be disrupted in that time? Well, there are those risks.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So let's move on to the pitch now. You mentioned how, you don't generally invest with like a passionate pitch. It's more through your connections or other ways that you find these companies. But I guess when companies are pitching to you at a macro level, I guess what factors are you analysing when a company comes and pitches to you for investment?
Oh, look, the first thing I want to hear is what problem are you solving?
Yeah.
If they start off with what our product is, and they start talking about the feature set and similar, there's a good chance that they'll lose me fairly quickly. There's a million great ideas out there. There's not a million great people. So understanding a company's ability to execute is very important. But the number one thing I want to hear is there's a problem. And the problem is that, I'll use the PushPay example, that it's very hard for people to make donations to their church in America because it's all cash and check and kiosks. And it's a Windows 95 experience when people are using, mobile commerce platforms at home. And so it's ripe for disruption. We have a solution to this problem. And all of a sudden it's like, okay, great. I understand what the problem is. I understand the solution. And now you can talk about how big that total addressable market is.
Right.
And so when I hear that early on in a pitch, that's what gets me switched on.
And it's a powerful vision, right? You're doing God's work.
Look, I'm not a particularly religious person, but I absolutely understood that churches in America were lacking a quality experience and that there was a tool or a technology that was going to solve that problem.
Yeah.
And as a part of that PushPay journey, there were things that the company learnt to improve its service offerings, not just to the person making the donation, but also to the people who were responsible for managing that giving and to improve the experience all through that journey.
Yeah, and talking about the problem that it solves is obviously something you mentioned a couple of times being a very important thing you're looking for. What would you say about the red flags in a pitch situation?
Oh, well, there's a couple of great examples I could share. So when someone starts talking about their investor base, rather than their product or the problem, essentially bragging about their investors, that's a clear red flag. We've got X, Y, and Z investor on board. We've got these funds on board. You've got these venture capital companies have come on board. We start dropping names. We're talking to these people right now. That's sort of like saying, oh, well, that's cool, so why do you need me?
Right.
Why am I here then? I actually would like someone to say, look, we're far too small to be on the radar of some of these big guys. But we absolutely have found a solution to a real problem. And it's actually quite big. So if we were to grow our platform and if we were able to develop our tools, we could actually start addressing a whole gamut of problems with our package of solutions. And all of a sudden I think, okay, well, this guy gets it. Or this girl gets it. These people understand the problem that needs to be solved.
Yeah.
And people who use the pitch process to brag about their star-studded investor base don't excite me. And ditto when I find out that there are companies who are bragging that I've become an investor, because we've got the guy from one of the guys from PushPay on the journey, on board as a share register. That actually makes me, well, it's a cause for concern.
Yes.
Because I'd much rather they went around saying, we've got this new feature set that's going to absolutely blow the market. We're going to be 2 steps ahead of the competition. That's what I want to hear a founder talk about.
Right. And for a founder watching this who goes, I want to get in the door with, there might be a strategic investor that they really want to get on board. What's your advice to them for making that initial contact if they don't have that connection?
Cold calling is tough. Sending someone an email, it's tough. It gets lost in the ether. I mean, people will do that anyway. But you'd be surprised how many people that, you can use a tool like LinkedIn to work out, well, who do I know in common? And so, if I was a founder and I wanted to meet someone like myself or a high net worth individual who's prepared to put in seed or Series A level money, for real scaling of growth, try and find out who they know in common and say,
Yes.
look, could you put in a word for me? I'd like to approach this person.
Yep.
Can you foreshadow them that I'd like to talk to them?
Yep.
And then all of a sudden, when I get that email, it's no longer a cold call email. It's actually something. Oh, yes, I remember my friend Max told me that James was going to be in contact regarding an idea. And so I just am then prepared to give it a little bit more time. So think about who you know in common.
For sure.
And use tools like LinkedIn to try and use that as an icebreaker to find people in common. You could potentially even put in a good word for you. I mean, you wouldn't ask them to put in a good word for you because you don't necessarily control that conversation, so you don't know what they're going to say. But it may well be that your friend can say, will say in the normal course of conversation, oh, hey, by the way, I mentioned your name to a friend of mine who's looking to raise money. I think you should probably have a chat with them. You might quite enjoy the conversation.
Yeah. And this next question, I guess, is very dependent on the type of company, the industry, so many things. But in general, when do you think is the right time for these early stage companies to go out and raise money? Because some prefer to do it off the deck, whereas others will bootstrap for months or even years. What's your advice?
Look, it really depends on the kind of company and what the founder's resources are. So I'm aware of companies that have bootstrapped all the way up to Series A. I'm aware of companies that try and get investors on board as early as possible. And there's no right or wrong answer. It really is dependent on the kind of company that and their specific demands. It may well be that if a founder is perfectly prepared to mortgage their house to make sure that they can hold on to as much of their company as possible in the early days and not be diluted, and they're prepared to take that risk. Whereas there are other people who say, no, I actually want to spread the risk around and I want to get the advice of other people on board to help me run this company and grow it faster. So it really does depend on a case-by-case basis. So I don't think there's a right or a wrong answer.
That's true, And what considerations should go into how much to raise?
Always try and grab a little bit more than you think.
Okay.
Look, there's a number of companies I've seen, both listed and unlisted, who have done capital raises where they raise enough for 6 to 9 months or maybe a year, but they burn a bit faster than expected. And all of a sudden, they've got to go start looking for more money again, and they go back to their existing investors, but they haven't actually been able to achieve the things that they set out to do in the last round. And so they go back to ask for more money, and they're not able to say, yes, we've hit that sales target, or yes, we've achieved those deliverables. So you want to make sure that you've always got enough cash to achieve the thing that you said that you were going to do, and a little bit more, because there's always a pivot, there's always a barrier, there's always a headache or a drama.
A few rainy days.
Exactly. And so you never want to be in a position where you've got to go back to your investors and say, we need more money, and we're very close to doing the thing that we said that we were going to do, but we're not quite there yet.
Yes.
And you're cheating yourself out of value, future value in your company, if you are you're cheating yourself out of future value if you are if you're not taking that into account.
Yes, that's great advice. It really is, So we'll move on now and talk more about the team and the entrepreneur himself or herself. You've said before that people's one of the main factors you're looking for when you invest. And I guess particularly at the early stage, arguably there's nothing more important, right, than having an entrepreneur who's prepared to put in the hard yards and make it happen. So I guess tell me broadly what you're looking for in entrepreneurs who you invest in.
Well, I think it's a given that you're looking for people who are hard workers. The nature of an entrepreneur is such that they've got to be hardworking, risk takers by nature, or swashbucklers, as I often think of them as. People who are prepared to challenge the status quo and be aggressive about what they do. But one of the things that I absolutely love about a founder or an entrepreneur is their understanding of the clarity of their vision. That whether they are able to espouse what their company does in a very short and succinct fashion. And so being able to take a very complicated idea and reducing it down to something as simple as a tweet, 140 characters or a very short sentence. And once I know that they understand what their company does and can explain it in a very plain English kind of way, I get a very good feeling that that these people are able to communicate their complicated ideas in a simple way to the people that they're trying to help.
Yes.
And it can be done.
Right.
It can be done easily. And so the example I like, and again, I'm not a religious person, but John 3:16 from the Bible, which is, for God so loved the world that he gave his one and only son, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
That sentence is 25 words.
Right.
And if it was a tweet, it would be under 110 characters.
Yes.
But yet it's the New Testament in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Again, I mean, I
Great
apologise.
example.
I'm not a religious person, but
great.
being able to communicate that vision to your investor is a very compelling and an exciting thing for an investor to see.
Yes, yeah. And from knowing some of the investments you've made and having discussed this with you before, I guess sometimes the companies have been led to quite favourable results, but the people along the way, you may have worked out that they're maybe not the greatest people or the greatest entrepreneurs themselves. I guess, and what red flags are you looking for? If you're sitting in a room and someone's pitching you a company that's amazing, but what about the people themselves? What scares you?
Yeah, so obviously people who party too much. I don't want to be a killjoy that says that you shouldn't have fun, but and look, I mean, entrepreneurs need hobbies and they need to blow off steam, but there are some people who love that party lifestyle a bit too much. But the other thing I think is a founder or a CEO who's too easily distracted by the latest things, so they can't stick to the plan. So you set a company vision, this is what we want to do, these are the deliverables by certain dates, that we promise to have these features ready for our customers on this particular day, and then there's slippage, and you're trying to work out, well, why did it slip? And it turns out that the CEO might have said, we have to make a whole bunch of user experience changes. And that sidetracks the entire team for a month. And so all of a sudden there's a slippage in the delivery of the actual functionality because something esoteric like user experience was addressed instead. And so, I mean, this is something I've actually seen.
Yes.
And it's frustrating because, it's the extra functionality that would have made their product more compelling to someone to buy.
Yeah.
Someone who's got a very clear sense of where they're taking the company and who'll hold staff members to accountability on deliverable dates and things like that. That's important.
Absolutely.
There's delays in any, whether it's a hardware product or a software product, things get delayed all the time. And so it's a fact of life, but making sure that the delays are not because you are, as a founder, going off the rails yourself, making all sorts of unreasonable changes. That's pretty important.
Founders you've invested in who do go a bit off the rails, why does that usually happen? Where do you see most of the Howard Hughes moments or Elon Musk moments?
Sure. Well, ego.
Right.
Ego. So being able to keep that ego in check and being able to acknowledge that other people have a viewpoint which is right, and that you may not necessarily be right. That being able to entertain an argument where you fight your corner, but at the same time, you're prepared to listen to what others are saying, and being in an environment where your staff members, your fellow C-level executives or middle management, or even the coder is able to say, actually, I think we're making a mistake here. And for you to say, well, please tell me why you think that is, rather than just do what I say.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And I guess, how do you view failure from previous startups when you're investing in entrepreneurs? Like if they've had a couple of failures in the past,
sure.
Are you more or less likely to invest based on that?
It depends what the failure's like, because if they failed fast, then I actually think that's a good thing. If they've worked out that the project that they were involved in didn't have the right market fit, or that they knew that it was just going to be too competitive, and that whatever reason why they went into it just was no longer compelling, and so it made sense to shut it down, and they did it with like angel money, so there weren't vast amounts of capital being wasted, then that's what angel capital's for. You've got to validate
Yep.
right? And if they've worked out that they don't have something they can validate and they shut it down,
Yep.
then that's a good failure.
Yes.
You know, you don't want to waste a lot of time and money
Yep.
on something that's not going to work, or worse, struggles along for 5 years until you finally give up. So someone who struggles along for 5 years desperately trying to make a lemon succeed, and they keep raising capital in drips and drabs, and they cost out the business to save money, but in the end, after 5 years, they realize, no, it's not going to work out. That's a bad failure. So, and especially because you've taken on board more money, and there's more people that you've got to start making apologies to.
I guess it's that saying, like, this conventional wisdom is never give up, right? So entrepreneurs sometimes can be blinded by that. You know, they believe they can do it even if it's not working.
I think there's a big difference between persistence versus being in denial about where your company or product is going. And so, you know, the CEO will blame the sales staff or the marketing people and say, oh, we need to change the marketing person because we're not getting sufficient leads. Then they'll say, oh, we need to get rid of the salespeople because they're not closing. Whereas the CEO has probably not actually gone to the major customers and said, look, you know, I understand that you're thinking about dropping us. Why is that? And it may well be that, oh, well, you know, your customer service is dreadful. Or it may well be, look, your product doesn't do enough for us.
Yeah, and when people are coming in and the team is talking to you in these initial, I guess, meetings when you're looking to invest, a lot of people prefer to have, I guess, an exit plan or, you know, possibilities or exit strategy, for want of a better word, worked out. And it can be quite polarizing. A lot of investors I've spoken to say, we don't want to hear any of that. We just want to hear what you're building.
Absolutely.
How do you feel about that?
Look, I think that they can very briefly say, for example, we think that at next it's probably going to look like a trade sale or an acquisition rather than an IPO. You know, this is the way that we feel about it. And that's all they've got to say. I don't want someone who's going to talk for 10 or 15 minutes about the kind of exit that they're after, because the only thing they should be telling me is about how they're going to be solving people's problems, making people's lives better, how they're going to be growing the business, having great customer service, making people happy. And if they focus on that as a part of the pitch or the overall presentation, that makes me feel good, rather than someone who says, oh, we're going to IPO at this level and then, you know, we'll be able to take our money out, etc. It's like, oh, you know, that's pretty unrealistic.
And when you're assessing, I guess, the ability to execute, particularly with, I guess, young founders who don't have a huge amount of experience in the past of other companies, so you can't do a huge amount of research on their previous track record as such. What sort of factors are most important to you? How do you assess that?
Who they're taking advice from. If they've got advisors, whether it's a formal advisory board, or whether there's like a close-knit circle of other entrepreneurs or people who they get advice from on how to scale and build, then that's comforting. But sometimes it's an instinct thing as well. You know, you look at a person and you get a sense of, this person's a real go-getter. You know, this person's got the drive and the gumption to succeed. And yes, there's going to be pivots, and maybe they'll start off with a helicopter chartering business, and then they'll work out, no, that's no good. It's got to be boat chartering, and so the product gets changed fairly dramatically. But the person still has a great idea of what it is they want to become and the sort of product that they need to deliver. So you know, making big pivots are required. Especially at that very early stage angel level.
I think I interviewed a founder of a company in San Francisco, and I believe they started as they were trying to create a better version of LinkedIn. That was the original kind of vision that they pitched to their investors, and they raised quite a bit of money off that. And then they evolved or pivoted to, I believe it was like a sports media company or something. I can't quite remember the middle one, but it was something in media or, you know, and then they pivoted again to a gaming company. And they ended up creating games and ended up leading it to an exit somewhere between $1 and $2 billion in a two-part sale, which is a very happy outcome for all the investors. But it was an amazing, I guess, example of people did come in to invest in the entrepreneurs, and then when it wasn't turning out so well, they kept backing them to evolve, to come up with new things. And
so that goes back to the question you asked before, which is that their persistence made them realize, hang on, we don't have a business model here. But if we pivot and try something new, where we think that there's an opportunity for the things that we've learned, then maybe there's a business model here instead.
Yeah, exactly.
As opposed to keep trying to be a better LinkedIn.
Yeah, exactly. And just finally on this, I want to use PushPay as like a case study here. Like when you first looked at that opportunity, talking about the team, Chris and Elliot, what were you looking at and what did you see in them?
I saw people who had already been selling their solution into churches already, and they had some rave reviews from people who, or churches that had been using their product already. So that was a great sign. So we knew that there was a problem that they were solving, because a large LA-based church was saying, these guys make a world of difference to us. As I said, it became quite clear that it was an unusual, narrow but deep niche.
Yes.
Church payments and church engagement was just ripe for disruption, but no one was looking at it. Everyone was looking at, well, how do I buy a cup of coffee more easily?
Yes, exactly.
Or how do I buy groceries online more easily, or whatever.
But yet 320,000 churches in America or something, right?
315,000.
Wow.
Yeah. Of which only a quarter of interest to PushPay, because that's the deepness of the niche that they're interested in, the larger sized churches. It's they absolutely and clearly understood what they wanted to be and to whom.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, so I want to move on briefly and talk about the idea itself now, because a lot of ideas, I guess, when we hear them for the first time, I think if we were to sit here and Lime was not a thing, these scooters driving around, we would probably say it's not a great idea, right? We're going to create these scooters.
I love e-scooters. I actually bought one apparently for my child, so that when he's a bit older, he can take it to get to the train station more easily, and so you can recover half an hour a day in commuting.
Yeah.
But look, we think about these sorts of ideas, and you're absolutely right. It's all of a sudden things change and something happens.
Exactly.
And in the case of e-scooters, it was obviously quality batteries becoming very cheap.
Yeah. But e-scooters, I guess, a great idea is that, a great product. But if we were to come up with this business model where they're going to get parked anywhere on the street and randoms are going to drive them and then come and pick them up and take them home and charge them and put them around the city, like, it'd be easy to make an assumption that that's a dumb idea, right? I think.
Not to the company owners. Not to the company owners.
So I guess the point I'm trying to make is a lot of these ideas, these big ideas that become multi-billion-dollar companies, can seem like crazy ideas at the start. So I guess what's your advice to entrepreneurs about distinguishing between crazy ideas that have big potential and ideas that are just not very good?
A lot of people get focused on product.
Yeah.
They say, I've got a great product and therefore people are going to buy it.
Yeah.
Maybe that's true. But more often than not, if you've got a great product that doesn't really meet someone's needs, then there's no compelling need to buy it. Or it becomes a fad and it's not very sticky. But when you've discovered someone's pain point, that, gosh, I'm just being driven up the wall by the amount of, tax certificates that I've got to generate every year, for all my clients and customers, this takes me the better part of a week.
Yep.
And then someone can turn that from a 1-week job to a 1-day job. Well, that's a pain point that you're solving, and people will buy that.
Yes.
Whereas if I went out there and said, I can make your tax certification process easy, people might say, that's all very well and good, but, you're not really pulling my chain. You're not really exciting me. But when you understand that someone is being driven up the wall by it, you could say, look, I can take one of the more meaningless and facile tasks that you do every year and reduce it by 80% to free you up to do the things you really want to be doing. Then you say, well, gosh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
So beware of people who are too product focused. Rather, this is sales talk. Be solutions focused rather than product focused.
Okay, and what do you think is the best way to validate or kind of crap test an idea? Like, should entrepreneurs go out and build a product and take it out, or do you think they can do that just by having these conversations with the right potential buyers first?
Well, in some ways, that's kind of a bit before where I get involved as an investor.
Yes,
so that's
true.
why you have startup and angel investors to validate. But before you go to someone like myself for seed and Series A, you'll want to have a white paper or some kind of customer validation, that says, oh, we use such and such a product, and gosh, these guys have, dramatically sped up the amount of time that it takes to do this, or we're reporting 10% bigger sales numbers when we use this particular product as a sales tool, and we've cut this amount of cost out, and we've delivered this amount of benefit. And so when you can actually see that, yes, you've got a customer who raves about your product and loves it, then you can see it's a real solution rather than just a product.
Right, and Paul Graham, the legendary venture capitalist and founder of Y Combinator, has said that the best startup ideas are frighteningly ambitious. Frighteningly, I should say, ambitious. What do you see as the greatest characteristics? You've mentioned pain point. What other sort of characteristics would you say entrepreneurs should be aware of?
That's actually a hard one to answer, because you could actually take an opposing viewpoint as well. That sometimes it's the incredibly mundane, which is ripe for disruption as well. It's the most boring tasks that people hate. As I said, tax certification. Yet PushPay was able to find a process that made it a lot easier for these part-time financial controllers to reduce the amount of time they spend on tax certification. And that was a very compelling reason to bring the product on board. In fact, the financial controllers of these churches were often the barriers to PushPay being implemented. You had the executive pastor or the marketing people saying, yes, this is great, we absolutely need to bring on this product, it's going to help us engage more with younger people. And the financial controllers say, yeah, but it's just another thing for me to have to manage. And all of a sudden, when you say, well, we're going to actually solve this problem for you, it's like, oh gosh, well, how soon can we implement you? So, turning the mundane into, solving the mundane and the boring is as much a reward as it is to find something that's just frighteningly ambitious.
I mean, quite often, right?
Because I'm sure that Paul Graham was probably thinking about the likes of a Facebook or a company like that. But there's oodles of great small companies out there that are helping people do their jobs better. And there's real value in that.
Yeah, for sure. And quite often those areas that are the hyped up kind of like hot areas is where everybody's trying to build these companies, right?
And you've got to be grounded as well, because I mean, it's all very well saying, oh, this company's going to be the next Facebook. It never happens, right?
The next food tech unicorn, or very few of them do, I guess.
It's few and far between. Whereas there's a lot of companies out there that actually grow to very respectable valuations. They're not billion-dollar exits, but they're very respectable exits nevertheless, and very rewarding processes. And the products go on to live inside perhaps another big company and do great things there.
Yeah, for sure. And how do you assess the total addressable market when you're analysing opportunities?
Oh, to be fair, I probably don't. I actually just try and do some due diligence on the claims that the founders make and see if they pan out, or I'll bring in external advisors to help try and understand that. I mean, I know what my circle of competency is, and so for something that's very wide, such as trying to understand a total addressable market, I'm happy to bring in external experts, or just try and prove that the person pitching me is telling the truth.
Peter Thiel's very big on kind of finding monopolies or getting market dominance and almost building a monopoly or having a clear path to some sort of monopoly or market domination. How do you sort of think about that? Is that something you're looking for in the companies you invest in?
Well, I'll say this: I'll never want to invest in a company that just competes on price. I want to invest in companies that provide a meaningful improvement in the way in which people can do business, and that they have a moat around their price. People are happy to pay that price because they get such a great experience. So it doesn't have to be a monopoly. It could be quite a competitive environment. But where that environment is significantly large, again, you can find a very narrow but deep niche that enables you to be very successful.
It's like that competitive edge, right?
Exactly. But you never want to fight on price.
Yes, for sure.
And if a company says, here's the matrix of all our features, and we do all the same things as our opponents do, but you can see our price is $10 a month and they're $15 a month. It's like, well, I'm sorry, I'm not interested in that. You know, there's nothing truly unique about being cheap, because someone will just come along and cut it out.
These are much bigger companies, presumably with much bigger finance, the competitors they're going up against, right? So for them to bring their price down.
And Xero is a great case in point, where they've been globally successful but struggle in America because it's such a competitive market over there, and competing on price is tough because you have much wealthier opponents like Intuit, you know, who are able to take a haircut on pricing in order to keep out the competition. So you never want to be in that particular position. You want people, and look, Xero's great success is where the Apple of accounting. You know, there's such beautiful, easy to use software, and people in Britain and Singapore, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand respond to that.
I want to talk briefly now about investor evaluation, but from the entrepreneur's perspective, because I've heard a lot of people say, you know, sometimes a bad investor can be worse than no investor.
Sure.
You know, so for entrepreneurs, what considerations do you think should go into? Let's say they've got a really hot idea that it isn't that hard to raise money from, and you know that does happen sometimes. You know, how should they think about who they take money from?
Always take the smart money. If you have a choice between taking smart money and passive money, always take the smart money, because getting the advice of people who have been there and done it before, or who can provide expertise on scaling, who can help you avoid pitfalls, because time is more important than money when you're trying to scale a company. You know, you want to make sure that you're getting the very best advice possible. If you've got an investor base who can be a quasi-advisory board in that very early stage growth, that's a great position to be in. Sometimes it's quite attractive to take money from people who say, no, I don't want to be a board member, or I'm just happy just to sit passively in the background, just take my money and I'll let you do what you want to do. For some people, that's great because they don't want to have toes being tread on. But there are ways to manage the quality advice that you can get from investors without imposing a structure that constrains a founder from being that sort of swashbuckling pirate that needs to get stuff done.
Yes.
And so there's a great example in some of the investments that we've done where we have said, we want to have the information flow. We want to get the best information, which is the board packs. But we don't have to be a director. We're just happy to have observation rights. And that's been quite a successful tool for us in a sense as an investor, because we didn't want to spook the entrepreneurs and the founders. We wanted them to feel good about us, that yes, we want the best information flow, but we don't want to be the ones at the boardroom table, pounding our fists on the table saying, why haven't you reached this metric?
Exactly, And I guess that information flow is going to allow you to work out whether you put future money in as well.
Oh, sure. And the irony is that because we earned the trust of the founders on one of these particular companies, I've gone from being an observer to the chairman.
Right.
So, it was just, a way in which trust was built, and they liked the advice we were giving as observers, and they said, well, actually, we'd like to formalise your involvement around the boardroom table.
What are some signs of a bad investor that entrepreneurs should be aware of?
A bad investor?
Or someone who's going to cause headaches?
I would be very wary of investors who overpromise. There are investors who say, oh gosh, we've got great connections here, and we know all the people involved in this particular industry, and so if we come on board as one of your investors at a suitable discount, then you'll be able to leverage all the benefits of our relationship with this particular sector, and so you can sell into there more easily. And I've seen examples of that where people have been underwhelmed by the outcome.
Right.
That the contacts are weak and tenuous. It's actually quite hard work for the founder to then manage, because they don't have the sort of warm introductions that they thought that they were going to get.
Yes.
Where the simple proximity of the investor somehow generating revenue, it doesn't work out that way. The company's got to go out and sell itself.
Right.
Just simply relying on the golden glow of an investor to somehow generate
a few introductions
a
here
few
and
introductions here and there, and that's going to make a world of difference. No, you've actually got to go out and earn your sales.
Yes.
Where it does work is where the investor has true skin in the game and will actually start taking you to meet your prospective sales. So you could say, well, actually, I do know the dairy industry extremely well, and so I'm going to go and take you to meet a C-level person at Fonterra, so you can discuss your solution with them.
Yes.
And so when you have that kind of investor who's able to open doors, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
But if you just simply say, oh yeah, we know these people, etc., and then you get very soft introductions.
Right.
So that's something that founders should be wary of.
Okay.
Being able to qualify that smart money, that well-networked money, as being able to actually truly offer the sort of benefits that they say that they can, rather than just simply big noting about all the people that they know.
And like investors do due diligence on entrepreneurs should be doing due diligence on their investors as well, right?
Sure, a lot of them aren't that choosy though, they just want the money.
That's true. Yeah,
but where companies are in the happy position of being able to take investors, if you can take smart money, if you can take well-networked money where the people are genuine about being able to make introductions, and where the synergies are real and can be exploited rather than just theoretical, then yes, that's absolutely something a founder should grab with both hands.
Right, and I think it's probably fair to say that most VC firms today are quite founder-friendly, or certainly more so than they probably used to be.
Sure.
What do you think are some terms, though, that entrepreneurs should be wary of if investors are trying to work these into the investment agreements?
Rather than talk about specific legal terms, I will talk about dilution as a general theory.
Yes.
So a good investor will want to see their founders retain as much of their shares as possible, particularly at the cheaper valuations, because you want to see them have that skin in the game.
Yeah.
And so ways in which an investor can help protect against founder dilution, whether it's by mechanisms that prevent specifically founders being diluted or at a lesser rate, or whether it's a way for founders to earn more options to compensate for the dilution that's occurred previously, then those are things which founders should obviously be thinking closely about, because
That's
then you start to see a synergy between founders and investors, working together, rather than say some VC who's trying to screw some poor young founder to go from say 20% down to 12%, and all of a sudden the founders say, oh well, gosh, I don't have much skin in the game, I'm not going to make the kind of exit that I thought I was once going to get.
The sacrifice might not be necessary, or might not be worthwhile.
Exactly. Why should I work so hard? Why should I take so much risk? A good investor should be thinking about how they can help the founder. And look, it's not necessarily just an options thing too. I mean, there's many ways to look at compensation, or to provide benefits to key staff, to ensure that they're well looked after. But well look after them you must.
And just finally on this, I guess, it relates to what you're saying regarding valuations. Like at the very early stage, it can be really hard to put valuations on these companies. How do you think about that, when people come?
Sure. Look, it's psychology. In 2015, 2016, it's 12 times revenue, easy. We're in a 12 times revenue environment for a company that's, growing like we are. And these days, gosh, 6 or 7 times revenue is probably more fair. For thinking about the sorts of companies. So if you're in an environment where other people seeking to invest are being aggressive about a fast-growing company, then you've got to kind of live with what the multiples are that people are looking to pay. There's no hard and fast science about the sort of multiples that people are prepared to pay for a company. A lot of it is psychology and the macro environment, and also the unique factors of that particular company.
I've just got one final question on venture capital, particularly here in New Zealand. Like, do you there's a lot of talk that in terms of that early stage investment, whether it's seed, maybe even Series A, angel, there's quite a bit of money available and investors wanting to invest. But when it gets to that later stage and companies are going out to raise $60-70 million, like there's just not really that those investors here. Do you think there's a market, or do you think if someone like a Peter Hulich were to set up like a $500 million fund or a $1 billion fund, New Zealand would there'd be enough opportunities to justify that?
Oh, absolutely. Look, I thought about your question, and my answer is we absolutely need more billionaires. And I don't mean that facetiously. I think we genuinely need people who've got a higher risk tolerance for investing in fast-growing companies that are really looking to scale up and who can sustain a level of contribution. So it's seed, Series A, Series B, Series C. We don't have a strong venture capital network here in New Zealand, although Australian and American and Asian VC companies are certainly, New Zealand's are certainly on their radar. And there are some great companies that come over here and invest. But you look at Spark, they tried to set up their own venture fund.
They shut that down, right?
And they shut it down because there just wasn't the risk appetite by other companies.
Yeah.
That's a terrible shame. I mean, Spark should have really been congratulated for trying to deliver something which was new and welcome. But unfortunately, the other corporates in New Zealand just didn't have that kind of risk appetite.
Yes.
So, facetiously, if we could have more US billionaires coming to live in New Zealand, and I know that there's been a few making their way over, that's actually a great thing in terms of if they're interested in participating in New Zealand early stage high growth, because they'll have that risk appetite and the ability to sustain that kind of investment beyond just 1 or 2 rounds.
Yeah, so you think funding will become more readily available at the later stages in New Zealand over the next 10 years?
It has been maturing. Yeah. I mean, if I think about where we were in 2010, it was all angel, but now you've actually got some high net worth families and funds made up of families who've had exits from companies. You think about Charlie's Orange Juice. You think about Trade Me, Diligent, Pushpay. There's some great stories out there, and that capital is now being recycled into new ventures.
Yeah. Okay, that's really exciting. So we're going to head into the rapid fire questions to finish now.
Sure.
The personal computer, the internet, the smartphone, these have all catalyzed major shifts in the way we live and work. What do you think the next major kind of thing that's truly going to change the world is going to be?
Oh, I'm looking very closely at artificial intelligence and cybersecurity.
Right, okay. And where are you currently making your biggest bets? Is it in those spaces?
Mostly in fintech SaaS, so financial technology companies, mostly with a SaaS model.
Yeah.
But I am actively looking at both, not yet to invest, but looking in artificial intelligence and cybersecurity investments.
Right. What is something that many entrepreneurs overlook or misunderstand about raising capital?
Not taking enough.
Right.
Look, and it's not just entrepreneurs, it's also early stage companies, even listed companies. They take enough money to get them through to what they think will be the next gate or cycle to start raising more money, but they spend more money than they realise, and things get pushed out, and all of a sudden they don't have much to show for by the time they've then got to go raise more capital. So take a bit more than you need, and make sure that you can reach that next gate that you promised your investors.
Yeah. What are the three books that you think every aspiring entrepreneur should read?
I don't know what an entrepreneur should read, but I know what every aspiring investor should read.
Yes, that's good advice as well.
So if that's the case, I would absolutely have to start with The Intelligent Investor by Ben Graham. So Dr. Benjamin Graham was the Columbia School of Business, and he was Warren Buffett's professor. Okay. So he basically invented the field of value investing, which is looking at a security and analysing it to see whether it's cheaper than it should be. So that is a great book. Yeah. I would also recommend One Up on Wall Street by Peter Lynch. Peter Lynch was the fund manager who ran Fidelity Magellan for that incredible period in the 70s and the 80s with massive outperformance. And he's got these great anecdotes about applying everyday activities to your investing strategy. So if you go to the supermarket and you see canned food is $2 a can, then you don't buy it because it's very pricey. But when you see it's 5 for $5, you load up. And so the same principle applies with how investors should work. So those are the sort of great anecdotes that he offers up. And the third book, which I found really interesting, is called The Zulu Principle by Jim Slater, which is the Zulu Principle basically says that everyone can become an expert in something, which enables you to become a proficient investor in that thing.
In that field. It's great advice.
So whether it's researching the history of Zulu warriors, as this example that Jim Slater used, that someone can become an expert in that one particular thing that gives them a true edge or an advantage.
Right. And in summary, what do you think are the key reasons that startups fail from your experience?
Why they fail? Not taking the right advice.
Yep, absolutely. And what market do you see being most oversaturated with startups today?
I think markets tend to auto-correct. So where there tends to be oversaturation, for short periods of time or medium periods of time, the market's got a way of weeding that out. But
right.
I have to say I was pretty astonished at the way in which every man and his dog was leaping into Bitcoins and ICOs and cryptocurrencies and blockchain. 2 years ago, a year ago, I'd go to Chinese restaurants and someone would identify me as a push pay investor and they'd say, "Oh, are you investing in Bitcoin?" It's like, "Oh, no, I know nothing about that.
Yeah.
It's musical chairs. I don't want to play musical chairs."
Yep. Yeah, for sure. I read a funny story a couple of days ago. The Winklevoss twins, who were the guys who were in Facebook in the early days with Zuckerberg supposedly, they're suing now someone that they did a Bitcoin deal, and from memory,
Yep.
I believe they transferred him $250,000 to invest in Bitcoin on their behalf, but the
Yep.
guy only went and invested like 180 of it, and then the difference that he didn't invest is now supposedly worth like $35 million or something. So,
well, the great anecdote I loved was someone explaining the theory of Bitcoin. Is it Bitcoin farming, or what do you call it when you
mining?
Bitcoin mining. And exchanges, and then using Bitcoin as a means of exchange. He said, okay, so basically I'm taking my expensive SUV, I'm letting it idle. This solves Sudoku puzzles that I can then trade for heroin. And, when you hear it put like that, of course, it's facetious, but, it's there's an element of truth in it. The people just got carried away by this whole new paradigm, and that's usually the warning sign.
Yeah.
When someone says there's a brand new paradigm, things will never change, this is the way of the future, it's like, okay, well, the bubble's is well underway.
Yeah. What single entrepreneur and then also investor do you look up to the most today?
Oh, Steve Jobs. Yeah, no two questions about it. There is no one on this planet who has had that kind of sense of elegant design, that desire for creating beautiful products that people could enjoy, that make using their lives a little bit easier, a desire for simplicity and minimalism. I late at night I'll enjoy going to YouTube and watching examples of Steve Jobs present on YouTube. And there's just no better showmanship. The time when he announced the iPhone, and he said it's actually 3 products that we're unveiling today. We're unveiling a personal navigator, a mobile navigator, a widescreen iPod, and a mobile phone. And he repeats himself and he repeats himself and he says, "Are you getting it? These are not 3 separate devices." And it's the best showmanship you'll ever see from a businessman. It's not a surprise that when he died that people actually were so truly saddened because they came to identify his business genius with objects they just loved to hold and use.
What about investor?
Warren Buffett. There's an Indian American man called Monish Pabrai, who's a disciple of Warren Buffett, and he's written a brilliant book called The Dando Investor. And that's a lot about allocating capital when you understand the risk of an investment. So how big the bet? How big is the bet? And so he's fascinating as well.
Okay. And what do you think the 16-year-old boy you were would think of who you've become today?
I think he'd probably be pretty pleased with how I turned out. Obviously, happily married, nice family. Life is going great. Life is terrific.
That's good.
Life is terrific. I think 16-year-old me would probably wish I played golf better.
Right. If you were to look at that 16-year-old and give him one piece of advice, what do you think you would say to him?
Talk a little less. Have some more hobbies. Work out how you can make people's lives better. Both in a business sense, but also in a social sense, Of course, everyone should be focused on how you can improve your own life and have the best possible life that you can. I would measure my success in the future based on how much I can help others. So being more philanthropic, being able to invest in things which do great things to help people. So future success for me is being able to give away more money.
Right, and what cause is most close to your heart?
There's a variety of causes that we like to support. We're of course giving much more strategic thought about philanthropy now that we've reached the stage that we're at. We like funding buildings because it's hard infrastructure that can benefit a community for decades, if not 100 years. So being able to, say for example with the Auckland City Mission, or even with schools that we've helped, you're being able to make contributions towards buildings is attractive because they're assets which communities can enjoy and get benefit from over a long period of time.
Right, and you've got your art collection, your watch collection. What's the next collection you're going to start?
I think that's probably enough for now.
Don't worry, we won't send this to your wife.
Yeah, look, no, I don't know. No, well, that's the thing. I mean, I don't wake up thinking I need fast cars because we've had plenty of fast cars in our family history. Look, I really enjoy art because it makes me think. I do enjoy watches because they're things of beauty and they've got an intrinsic value about them.
Maybe old school Apple products.
Oh, I've got a couple of those too. I own what's called the 20th anniversary Mac.
Right.
Which was a limited edition computer. If I showed it to you, you'd say, my God, that's space age for 1997.
Yes.
Anyway, look, I don't think that I need to collect anything more.
Yeah.
I think I need to collect experiences, funnily enough. I think I need to, in fact, I'll share with you one anecdote. When I met the man in Boston who I've bought a lot of my wristwatches from, he told me, you've got 3 boys? I've got 3 boys too, because boys are great. I love to take my boys just on one-on-one trips. If I go to Geneva or London, because he was in Boston, I love to take them on one-on-one trips. It's great bonding. And I just heard that and I thought, gosh, that's a terrific idea. Yeah. One-on-one trips, with a son or daughter, and spending that sort of one-on-one quality time with them. And so I've sort of resolved to do more of that.
That's really nice, yeah.
So collecting experiences. I think I've got a obligation as a father to take my children to the historically important places of the world. They can go to lie down on a nice beach anytime, but I'd actually like to take my boys to the D-Day beaches. And say, something happened here and you need to know all about it. Yes. Or certain grim places in Germany and Poland. We've been to Pearl Harbor, for example, and Singapore and understood the terrible things that have happened there in the fog of war. So I'd like my boys to be historically worldly.
Yes, yeah. And just before we finish off, what quality of mind or state of mind do you think has best served you in your success?
Being optimistic.
Optimistic?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Life is great. If life isn't great, then make some changes in your life so you can have a more healthier outlook on life. Everyone has challenges. Everyone has disappointments. And of course, some people's lives, do truly take difficult turns for the worse. Yeah. But you're only on this planet for a short time, and so make the most of it.
And what would you say you're most proud of when you reflect back over your incredible success so far?
Oh, my family.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's the best investment of all is the time I've spent with them. On my Facebook page, I say I'm a venture capitalist, children's football junkie, and art lover.
Yes.
And so it's true. I just adore following my children at football tournaments and cheering them on from the sideline and seeing them excel at teamwork and the beauty that comes from seeing them interact with others in such a positive way. It's
Yeah. And I suspect the answer to this is probably quite similar, but what have you discovered in your life to be the secret to happiness so far?
Oh, my wife, probably.
Right.
No, that's no secret.
Yeah.
It should be no secret that if you love someone and you intend to spend the rest of your life with them, then that's a great investment in itself.
Yep. Absolutely. So it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Yeah,
Thank you
your
so
story's
much.
amazing, and it's been a huge honour to get to know you and learn a lot from you, and to have you invest in our company as well was very special. So thanks for all of your support and advice and wisdom, and it's been awesome.
My pleasure. Look, I've loved being a part of this Unfiltered journey as an investor, and you guys are doing great things. So of course I'm following it with incredible interest.
Thank you so much. The last question we always ask, Aaron, is whether you can look down this camera here and tell us what is your $1 billion piece of advice for the world of business, entrepreneurship, and making things happen.
Learn to solve someone else's problems. Learn how to make other people happy. And you'll find that that's actually a great solution, not just for business, but also for a great personal life too.
Aaron Bhatnagar, thank you.
Thanks,
Cheers.
Jake.
Awesome. Great.